Good evening. Welcome everybody here. It does appear we have a quorum, so we'll call the meeting together. We'll call the meeting to order and commence at 6:03. And according to our agenda, the first thing we need to do is ask if there are any absences that have come to anybody's attention, any excuses. Okay, then we'll go with the roll call.
Alternate member Thomas Lemasters.
Here.
Alternate member Andrew Forster. Member Bill Bengesa.
Here.
Member Anna Olvera.
Here.
Member Stephen Martino.
Here.
Vice Chair Richard Beneke. Chair Steve Cooley.
Here.
Treasurer Baron Janetti.
Here.
Councilmember Carroll.
Here.
Mayor Martinez.
Here.
Okay. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Then we need to move on to the approval and adjustment to the, the first thing we need to do is approve the minutes from the previous meeting. Anybody see anything that needs to be noted or changed on those?
I will abstain from that vote since I was not here.
Okay, looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion, approve the minutes from last meeting.
Anybody willing to second that?
I will second.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, with no opposed, we'll go ahead and accept those and move on to any adjustments on the agenda. Has anything come up since it was published? Okay, nobody indicates any. And are there any conflict of interest that needs to be disclosed tonight? Public comment period. Do we have any public comments?
I have no requests.
Okay, so that moves down to the reorganization of the committee. We have some new members. We'll welcome you. Glad to see you here. If you'll take a minute and just stand and tell us who you are, for those of us who only met you for a second, and it also will be on the recording for any citizen who views it. We'll start with Bill. All right, we're glad to have you here, and we'll move to our other. Let's see, we have an alternate, right?
Yes, sir. My name is Thomas Lemasters, and I've been a Beaumont resident since 2014. But I got a best friend who's lived here since '02, and he lobbied me for 12 years to move out here. He finally succeeded.
Okay, and let's go ahead. Those of us who are current, stand up and just, or you can sit there. Don't care.
My name is Steve Martino. I've been a member for the last year. Previously, before that, I was an alternate member.
Okay.
I'm Anna Olvera. I think I've been 1 year as a member, and so this is my second term.
I'm Steve Cooley. I'm the current chair, and I've been here somewhere a year and a half, whatever.
Nancy Carroll, and I've been here since we started this committee. And I'm very proud of the work that it's done. So, and I thank you all for serving. I was last year's mayor, which I bowed out to someone that you'll hear from in just a minute, and I am now council person. So thank you very much for all being here.
Everybody's looking at you. Barry hasn't been sworn in yet. Barry is our new treasurer, and I understand that swearing in's tomorrow at
4:30.
4:30. So you want to come
4:45 or 4:30?
4:30?
All right,
Okay.
4:30. I won't be late.
And I think we're over to you, Mayor.
Oh, okay. Mayor Julio Martinez. I've been on council for 3 years, and I came over from the Economic Development Committee. And I was on there for 2 years. This is my first year on Finance Committee, and I'm glad to be here.
I am sorry. I'm Nicole. I'm the Deputy City Clerk, and I am the Secretary on this committee, so you'll be seeing me every meeting. If you have any questions, you can always contact me. I can be your point of contact for any questions.
Okay. I'm willing to serve and continue as the chair, at least for one more term, and Steve Martino is willing to serve as the vice chair. If we have no objections to that, we'll go ahead and do that. That'll give us some continuity. We can finish off the projects that we're currently doing.
To continue with the chair as Mr. Cooley and the vice chair as Mr. Martino.
I'll second.
Okay. Any opposed? Okay, with no opposals, we'll go ahead and move on with that. And we've already adopted the minutes, so that moves us on to our internal control checklist.
Okay, the internal control checklist, we continue to build on it. At our last meeting, we discussed some of the problems that I was running into with the bus passes and the transit department, and how we could best try to find a way to meet the need of that internal control. And I spent some time with them, spent some time at the City Hall cashiering clerks to see what they do on their side, to get a feel for all the different components, so that we could get that resolved. So we'll have that point of discussion. I think it's coming up. Yep, it'll be the next item. And then the other is the police department. Even though we had talked about it, we've now made that formal as well. So those two are well in hand and ready to go. The other items that we'd worked on was the fraud policy. That one came back from legal with some questions that we're working through now. And we now have drafted a reporting form, like an incident report form, that we'll make available to staff so that they can either they can submit it electronically, or they can drop it off. We changed the direction so that it could be to their immediate supervisor, or to another director, or to HR, or to the city manager. So we're giving them the ability to report up, depending on, the circumstances and what that is. We had it a little too specifically structured. So we're looking at some of those kinds of things. So we should have that back at the next meeting. It should be all put together, and we'll be rolling that out, as well as the training. We're looking at scheduling the annual update of training to staff. I think they're looking at the middle of February, so we'll just slip this in with everything else, and we'll get it covered with all the staff, so they'll be informed at that point in time. But we'll bring back the formal documents to this committee in the March meeting, but we'll have that as well. The only other things we still have in process then after those few is the business license, which we're continuing to do research on softwares, and I have a member of my staff who is familiar with the business license software we currently still have, and how it was being run through the cashiering system. She's looking for a way to use the reports from one system to match it up against the other. So we're looking for a way to do an interim solution for accounting for business licenses, to make sure that we've got all those accounted for. I'm hoping to have that written to this committee at the next meeting as well. And then the overhead cost allocation. I have not had the opportunity to get back in touch with our finance advisor, but I will be doing that, financial advisor, so that I can make sure that we've got that all nailed down based on how we're doing the allocation of overhead to the other funds, and keep that accounted for. So that's really where we are on the status of these different items. And I didn't know if there were any specific questions related to these items, but I do still have the hope and dream that everything will be done and settled before the end of March. And we'll have everything in place, or at least have an interim solution for all of the findings. And by then I should have the next letter, And hopefully it doesn't have anything new to then readdress. That's my hope.
Thank you. I think that answers any questions I have. The expectation of completion on 3/31. Any comments or questions from the committee?
Had one, so items, lack of the rest of the numbers, 7, 10, and 11 previously had due dates of 12/31. Now they're targeted for completion at 3/31/19. Is 12 still going to be in process beyond that date based upon what we're going to be reviewing shortly?
No, we will have, I believe,
12 also?
we can talk about it, but I believe we'll have these handled, the majority, and enough to satisfy the auditors and have a good handle on then being able to move forward with controls in place, and then we can continue to explore different ways of exploring some of the smaller items.
That would include the bus pass segregation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
That's what
great.
we're going to discuss next.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
I have one question. It's not, it's indirectly related to the, how is the overall audit progressing, timeline-wise?
I am expecting to talk to them this week about some questions they had for reporting so that I can begin the management discussion and analysis pages that are at the front of the entire reporting so that I can get that done so that we will have that, that final report and the internal control report for the next meeting. That is the goal, and they know that. We'd like to have it so we can present it to council at not the meeting tomorrow, obviously, but maybe the meeting after that, have something for council to look at. But then we can discuss it further at this committee in more detail and make plans going forward.
So in the March meeting, we're hoping.
That's what I have planned, yes.
All right. Entertain a motion to accept the report and file.
I'll make a motion to receive and file. Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
Any opposed? I'll accept that and move forward. The next one is the monthly pass sticker reconciliation to cash receipts.
Indeed. There was a lot of confusion. I think we finally worked through most of it, but there are a lot of difficulties in trying to implement a way to account for every single pass or sticker that is issued. So I believe it's the last page of the report, is the little chart so that you'll know all the different passes that are sold, or stickers, and where they're sold at. So it's not just a matter that we sell them, but where we sell them so that we can control necessarily where they are. So not only do we have all the types of passes, we have 2 different levels for regular and then the senior and disabled, and then we have the 2 different route groupings, and then we have a whole ton of other route descriptions. So there's a lot of reporting that has to be done by the transit department to RCTC and for their own reporting, which is a little bit different than accounting for passes. So we looked at this, and my first thought was, what is the highest ticket item that we sell, which is the monthly passes? And so, fortunately, those are only sold in one location. Those are sold here at City Hall. They're not sold on the buses. They're not sold at the senior center. They're only sold here. Did verify that each one of the stickers for the passes, they are pre-numbered. They come pre-numbered. They're issued to the front desk, and we've come up with a way when they enter the cash receipt, we've been through the report of the receiving side to see if there's a way to account for the passes. We're going to try and see if we can make it all line up in the next month, because they've already been issued the February tickets when I did all of this evaluation. So we're going to start looking at February tickets. When they stop selling the February passes, they all get turned into finance so that we can see how many are left. And then we'll go back to the cash receiving system and run reports to see how many have been sold and see if we can back into it. There are a few things that'll make that difficult. One is someone can come in, and if they need to, they can buy the March sticker. That will be in the cash receipt, but I won't necessarily know it's February. We've told the cashiers to put in the month in the description, so hopefully we've kind of already covered that. And then we can't look at first day of the month to the end of the month for the sales. because you don't sell passes for the month at the end of the month. You know what I mean? Because that doesn't make any sense. So the time frame of the cash receipt evaluation, we may have to wiggle that because it won't fit with a monthly accountability that the stickers actually apply to. So we'll be working with that as well. But we're going to see how we can get February accounted for. And then we'll figure out if that worked, then we can tweak it if we need to, make that be the solid plan going forward for the high-ticket items. Once we've got that figured out and we can do those, then we'll talk about, you know, the next highest. It wouldn't be dial-a-ride. Dial-a-ride is its own creature, has its own thing, but we could look at the punch cards maybe if we can figure out a way to get all the locations accounted for. But to have it available on every bus at the same time can lead to some logistical problems in accounting for them. But I wanted to start with the high-ticket items, which is the monthly passes.
Okay, so are the monthly passes, do they have a month designated on the pass?
On the sticker, yes.
Okay.
And they're different colors and they have different codes.
Okay, so if there are, I'm just going to pick a number at random. So if there are 100 printed, and then they're all pre-numbered, and so at the end of the month, we should have numbers 1 through 100, and if we've only got 52 left, we have some way to track back the sales of those.
That's why we'll use the cash receipting system to run the reports to see where those sales are, and we can count how many of those are in the system. Like I said, though, the problem is the time frame, knowing that we've got the beginning and the ending of the sales period all accounted for, because it's not February 1st to February 28th. It could be January the 10th through February the
Yeah, I can see a timing issue with the accounting.
So we're going to work on that. We're going to do our first one for February, see how it looks, and see what we need to do to mush it around a little bit, see if we can get it accounted for, if we can nail that down. But that's really, we're starting with that one.
Okay.
Highest ticket, sold in one location, see if we can.
And do we have a way to track who sold what number?
We do have that ability, but not for February because they'd already been
Right.
issued. So
of course.
that's another thing. If it works out perfectly, I will be happy. But when we go to March, we more than likely are going to need to know which ticket numbers were at each station, and we'll do it that way. But the cash receipt report, we can run it by the individual that's ringing them up, but in the beginning, we won't be looking at it that way. We're just going to try and get it in total.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
So, Ms. Wood,
It's a tough one, let me tell you.
it probably sounds more time intensive than it is. When you run the report, you can actually identify on the cash receipts report that it's a bus pass, that it was sold at such and such a date, and who sold it, and that's what you actually work from, correct?
We have all of the fixed route bus ticket sales are in one code. So we'll run that code.
Yeah, okay.
And then we have to go through the dollar amounts. And when we hit the dollar amount that matches,
So
then
that
we go
part's manual?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll be doing it that way. We can run the report by person, but then we have 5 reports that we go 1, 2, 3. So we're going to do just the one master.
So that part where you're looking for the dollar amount, that part is like a manual type
Yes.
process
Yes.
where you're reviewing it, right? Okay.
But it agrees to the actual bank deposits because we've already done that part previously.
Okay. I actually, can I ask Elizabeth a couple of
Absolutely.
questions? that are
Elizabeth
related to
is
that?
our Director of Transit and Community Services and has all of the knowledge for all of this stuff.
And I'm leaving my coat on, I apologize.
Oh, it's freezing in here.
I already told the guys. Hi.
Hi.
Happy Monday.
Thank you, Milana. So, Elizabeth, my questions are actually related to, you know how other transit agencies handle this, correct?
I do, yes.
Okay, so, and I know that RTA is moving towards, you know, mobile bus passes and phones and everything. So, and I realize you're probably way ahead of me on this, but how is that going to affect what we do? And do you see another transit agency that's handling it extremely well that we're sort of feeding into as a way we can migrate?
Well, first, you're talking about Token Transit. Token Transit is a software that City Council approved a purchase, and it is buying your bus pass on your phone or mobile device. It allows the driver to see through a code whether or not the bus pass is active. That's going to help Milana and her team tremendously.
And that we're already doing. And so those are really not the ones we're concerned about.
Correct.
We're really talking about the old-fashioned, they come
Yes.
into the counter and,
We actually created this system here in Beaumont, and I'll tell you why. Most transit operators have electronic fare box. You get on the bus, you scan a card, or you give the driver money, and a card spits out with a magnet on it. We're not there. We are a very small operation. The electronic fare boxes are extremely expensive. I went and toured RTAs a few years ago, and Larry Rubio, the CEO, and I spoke. They have 200 buses, and we have 17. And to have an electronic fare box system here in Beaumont, we're just not large enough. They're labor intensive. If the electronic fare box machine goes down, the bus has to go down. We don't have enough fleet to supplement if that bus goes down. Likewise, we do a lot of fare exchange with Banning. If Banning doesn't come into the electronic fare box age with us, then our passengers can't transfer from one bus to the other. So we created this card with the sticker system, and it was something that Banning could also do. It's relatively cheap to do. It has a photo ID of the person, tells the driver what they're, if they're senior and disabled or whatnot. So I was happy that Milana did come up with this policy because it is needed. It has been something that I keep in the back of my head. How do I know we're getting the $36 for each passenger, et cetera? So I don't know if that answered your question. We're not at electronic fare box. We're trying to find something that solves.
No, it's an excellent answer because I didn't want it to be that we were thinking too microscopically about these bus passes, like, we were just doing a manual, we're doing what we can within the framework of the size of the transit agency that we are. And we are trying to make the system work with all the checks and balances that we can within that.
the token transit system, actually, it does work fabulously. And we're tracking that in separate GL accounts specifically. And we get weekly reports from the token transit software. And so that whole reconciliation is nice. And I think that the passengers like it, and I'm pretty sure the bus drivers like it too. That works really well. And it does give people the ability to get their bus fares and their passes taken care of without having to come and get a sticker.
Correct.
But there are some that are they're just not going to do that. They're going to come get their stickers. So in some ways, it's good because we should be selling less of these. So to account for them should not be horrible. We just have to find the right method and the right way and the right time frame to make sure we capture everything. So that might be the tricky part, but I don't think it's going to be too horrible because I don't think we're selling that many of them on a monthly basis.
So, since we started Token Transit, I know of one family that still buys the stickers, and it's just a technology thing. The stickers were started, we did not have a monthly pass program in place about 6 or 7 years ago, and it was something we created because we have passengers asking, I just want to pay once. I don't want to have to, we don't give change on the bus, so you have to have $1.15 every time you get on the bus. Parents don't want to give their kids $1.15 every day. It was just really a stopgap measure for the passengers to make it easier for them to write a check or pay with a credit card and have that one card with them to use on the bus. So we're hoping that the majority of the people do use Token Transit. It's a lot easier on both sides.
Okay, this is bringing up some questions for a bunch of us. Okay, can you explain the process a little better? I think we understand that the city is selling a pass that is a single document, and they're sold on a monthly basis. But then you're talking about token transit?
Token transit is the same concept, it's just on your phone. So it's not unlike buying Starbucks on your phone. You have an app, and you choose the fare media that you want. So if you want a monthly pass, or you want a weekly pass, or a daily pass, you put in your credit card information, you choose what you want, and it adds that pass, electronic pass, to your phone. And so when the passenger boards the bus, they have the pass open, and the driver can see.
Okay. And so I assume the software is going to generate that report.
It does.
It
The software is going to say, we sold so many of those.
It does.
And on a global basis, we don't really care how many people get on that bus. At
Well, I
least-
do.
Well, you do. You do if you find out that,
It's-
somebody's handing the phones around, or you find that somebody's
You know what?
riding
That's-
100 trips a
That's actually a
day.
good point, because that was one of the questions that I asked Token Transit. Omnitrans started this. They suggested we look at Token Transit. RTA came on board. Sunline's looking at it now. One of my first things, because I had teenagers, is how do I know they're not going to get on the bus, show the driver, walk down the aisle, and hand their phone out the window to their friend, right? Token Transit and Omni, because Omni was the guinea pig, they assured me that there are measures in place to prevent that. Number one, first and foremost, teenagers aren't giving anybody their phone. They do not want to hand their phone to somebody out the bus for fear they won't get it back. And then second, the drivers, the mirrors and the cameras and everything along the side, there's checks and balances. If they do it once, they'll get away with it. They won't do it twice.
Okay. And then the punch cards. I'm just looking at what's here. Explain to me what the punch cards are.
Punch cards were something else that we started as a stopgap measure for parents. 50% of our passenger base are youth. We transport over 200,000 passenger trips a year. So think of about 100,000 passenger trips per year are youth. Again, parents don't want to give their kids $1.15 every morning. And so we came up with a punch card system where we print them, we emboss them so they can't be faked. We emboss them, and we sell those on the bus. The bus drivers do sell those. They are numbered, and every time a child gets on, one number is punched. Those can be shared with siblings. Parents, they're $10. Parents can buy a punch card, and Johnny and Jane can get on the bus together, and Johnny gets punched once, not literally, but the card, and then he can hand it to his sister.
Sure. Okay, now, those are numbered, and so when they're handed out to a driver, I assume you're keeping track of what numbers the drivers have.
We do.
And then periodically auditing those, and the ticket book works the same way?
Yes, ticket books are actually printed by an outside printer, and they're individual tickets stapled in books of 10 with a nice cover on it, and those are numbered as well. Same idea. We have a log. If I hand the driver 100 through 110, that is logged in, and then when the driver sells the ticket book, they put it on their driver trip sheet that's sold, and we do spot checking to make sure that those are reconciled.
Okay.
But that's done within the transit department, because those kinds of things can't be done by the finance department.
Right.
Right.
And that makes sense. And I think that was the question we had when it first came up. As I recall, we were getting some comments that it seemed to be a difficult process, yet it seems to me and those of us that were here that it should be a pretty darn simple process. If you have 10 ticket books, let's say you have 17 and you hand out one to each driver, then each driver is responsible for the cash for the ticket books, or the ticket book should be able to show you one or the other. And as far as those punches, the overall operation, we need to know how many of those are being used in a given period, but we should be able to track that money rather easily.
You're correct.
Okay.
We have a bag, it's a little, like a pencil bag. Each driver has what we call issuance. So any of the fare media that they sell on the bus is in this bag that's assigned to them, and those get locked up every night in their individual lockers that nobody else has access to, only management. They stay on the premises. We will periodically go into the lockers and make sure that they have the exact number of issuance that they should based on their sales from the previous week or the previous 2 weeks. So we spot check when they're not on duty to make sure that the issuance are in there. And then we also reconcile with our trip sheets based on, they may sell 5 ticket books a week. And so we keep track of that with the log and the numbers that are sold.
And do we have a written policy as to how and when that internal audit is done?
No, we do not.
Okay. I'll kick this out to the rest of the committee. I think we should have a policy.
No,
It
and
doesn't have to be anything,
this has prompted many more policies
okay,
within transit.
okay. Anybody else have any questions?
I have a few questions. So, just so I understand it, the electronic token system we were talking about that's been authorized, it's in use now.
It is correct.
Okay, so it sounds like the bus driver, whoever's interfacing with the passengers coming on, is just observing their electronic device to see that they have something active on there. Is there any interface that the driver does that tracks, or the system tracks utilization of those monthly passes, like where it registers that utilization on that trip right there, or is it just eyeballing the format on the passenger's device showing it's active so they're allowed to come on without tracking the usage?
We do what's called passenger counts, and we count, every time a passenger boards, we count what type of fare media they are. And we are tracking the token transit for usefulness more than anything. We want to know that the system, there was no cost to buy the software. The cost comes from the commission. So we want to know, is it growing? Is it being used? So we're tracking in that sense, but not necessarily verifying what it is, the fare media. That's on the driver to do that, and I don't want to publicly tell, there's a way that the driver knows if it's legit or not.
Somebody can't just have a screenshot from their phone and just putting it on and everybody's, okay.
No, Token Transit thought of that. There's a running ticker on it, and if
Okay.
that running ticker isn't moving, it's a picture, not the software.
It's a live action.
Correct. Yeah, and then we know what color it should be. Nobody else does, and we know what picture. The picture changes frequently, so the drivers know all that. But we do track Token Transit, not the type of passenger within Token Transit.
Total utilization, but
Right.
not per monthly pass.
Correct.
Okay. And then just for self-education, the commuter 120, 125, they're shown as 120 is the commuter link, I guess, with other agencies? Is that what that 120
The
stands for?
120 is a commuter link that's regional, as is the 125. The
Which is-
120 goes to San Bernardino, the 120 goes to Redlands.
And for our audit and our purposes that we're looking at controls, we're mainly looking right now just on the monthly pass, not
Well-
the other transactions.
Right, because for finance to do the reconciliation, really the only one we would have complete control over the entire
What's sold
function
here,
is gonna be
right.
what's sold in City Hall.
Right, I
So
understand.
that's why we're sticking with that one.
I would love for everybody to go Token Transit, I'll be honest with you, but
It would be a lot easier.
it would be a lot easier.
What's the percentage of token?
I don't have that with me.
And does it come with a scan capability? If you had a handheld scanner, like you go into Starbucks, your phone is scanned, is that available? I mean, the data you'd be able to get would give you
It is available, but not to us.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're constantly, this particular app software has taken off. And this group that created this app very successfully, they're constantly tweaking it. And I'm hoping that at some point we can go complete Token Transit.
I'm sure they have all kinds of expansion capabilities for a slight fee.
Yes, as do all software.
And one other question, and maybe this is more for Melina than you. On those monthly passes, does the software system have a way to record those such as an invoice? So if no?
It's a strict cash receipting software that is available at the front counters. And then it batches into deposits by cashier, which we then put together for the bag picked up by.
Yeah, okay.
And then it gets batched into the general ledger. Yeah, so it's not, it doesn't work like a receivable type program. It's definitely cash receipt based.
The monthly stickers, transactions sold here only, they are for a calendar month, and they're purchased
Yes.
anytime during that month?
Or-
For only the same value for, so somebody buys it at the beginning of the month, they have the full month version?
It's always the full month
We don't
charge.
prorate. If somebody comes in today, the 4th, and they want a monthly sticker for February, they pay the full
full
price.
And it expires at the end of the month.
Correct.
Or
Which
they
is
come
why
in the 15th, they've only got 2 weeks worth.
And that's why we have
Right, and at some
punch
point, we'll
pass
stop
available.
selling February because they might as well just pay the $1.15 per.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions on this matter?
One more thing. I'm
Sure.
gonna plug our free fair project. So come March 1st, we have a grant from Caltrans to the tune of about $70,000 that needs to be spent by June 30th. And so everybody in the system is going to get free rides, and we will track those rides, and Caltrans will reimburse us for those fares. This is going to give, and the reason I'm telling you this is going to give Milana and her team a chance to get some bugs out with my team. And hopefully at the end of that 2 or 3 month period, we're predicting, we'll have policies in place and a better refined system. It'll give us a breather from selling fair media and counting vaults. We spend about 2 hours a day counting vaults. So it's going to give both of us some time to maybe tweak some of these a little bit. So everybody in the system's going to get to ride free.
So that's everybody who currently purchases one? You have that tracked, or in the system, do you mean within the geographic area?
Anybody that boards the bus will get a free ride. So there will be no purchasing.
Right, so there
Thank you.
won't
There'll
be
be no
any
qualification
selling.
for riders, just somebody coming on, they get the benefit of it.
Right. So the only thing the driver will have to do is general, senior disabled, veteran. They'll still have to count their passenger based on, so that we can say Caltrans give us $1.15 or give us 65 cents or whatever the cost is. So we will track that very carefully with the drivers.
So
So
that
that's-
dollar value, how long do we anticipate that's going to last for current traffic?
We're hoping 2 months. We're
2
doing
months.
this in conjunction with Banning, so Banning will be under our grant as well. So anybody on a Banning bus, Beaumont bus, they will all ride free, and it will all come from the grant that Beaumont received. Based on their passenger counts and our passenger counts average, we're hoping 2 months, we might be able to stretch it to 3. So now's the time for you all to get on the bus and ride it.
But this will help us figure out the best way to do the counts and figure out how to account for the numbers of, and then how we can coordinate it back, because you're right, Caltrans won't give us the money if we don't give them the right counts.
You'll be marketing that, I take it. There'll be-
Oh, absolutely. We've already started. We've actually hired a marketing company to help us. Yeah.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, entertain a motion to accept the report and file it.
Can I make motions, even though I'm not signing
No.
it, right?
Yeah,
I'm almost there.
yeah, till you get sworn in. So, anybody?
I'll make a motion to accept the report.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, any objections? Okay, let's move on to the next item, which is the after-hours cash receipts.
Right. Now, this is the one item that we knew had some issues when we had the first audit done. And so we had verbally talked to the analyst at the police department, okay, let's get this straightened out. And so they did, but we never put it in writing. It just wasn't high enough on the list of things to do. So now I've put it in writing. What they do, there's really only one item that is collected after hours, and it's only at the police department, and it's only so people can get their cars out of impound. They have to pay cash, it has to be exact amount, and then we have a special receipt book that has the city's name and all that on it that they fill out. It's 3 parts. Original goes to person so they can go get their car. 1 copy goes with the money, dropped in the safe. The 3rd one stays in the book. So the next morning, whoever the clerk is for that day at the front counter goes to the safe, gets it, checks off to make sure that they've got all the receipts, and then that money gets entered into the cash receipting system and becomes part of the deposit for the day. So we just now, it's now in writing that this is what the policy and the practice is for the after-hours cash receipts. But this is the only cash receipt that comes in after hours.
Okay. Seems to be pretty straightforward and pretty clear. Any questions?
Why can't we accept like credit cards?
Because we have our call center ladies are the ones that have to cover that front desk. And in order to use the credit card machine, they have to log into the cash receipting system, and we have to get them a login and the whole, no. So it's, if your car got impounded, and for whatever, then cash, exact change only, we're not even making change. There's nothing available to those ladies for that purpose.
Okay.
Is there a typical transaction amount? Is it average? Does it vary from transaction to transaction?
No, it's the same.
It's the same? And what is that amount?
I knew you were going to ask me that. Do you remember what it is? Don't. I've only seen it a handful of, they don't take it that often. And in my head, it's probably totally wrong, and I'm sure people will laugh, but I want to say it was like $357 or something. It's like a, yes.
It's a set amount?
But it is a set amount. It's always the
Okay.
same.
That sounds like it might be about right.
Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
in my head, that, but that may not be.
So this is just an impound release from the agency to whoever register or lien holder of the vehicle is. It
The
doesn't
tow
have to
yard.
have anything to do with their storage fees, wherever the impounding yard is. It's just a release from the agency for that yard to
So the tow yard can then charge them whatever their fee is.
Right.
It just compounds.
No other questions?
They can pay credit card though during business hours.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, so it's just the app.
It's just the after hours.
After hours.
Right, right.
Okay.
I'm going to ask one question. So the vehicle release paperwork must be presented as required.
Yes.
How does somebody prove it's that's their vehicle?
I'm not completely clear on all the specifics of it, but apparently there is documentation that they have to have with
Okay.
them.
All right.
That has to do with the whole everything, like the case number, and there's specific documents they have to provide in order to get the release.
All right.
Does our officer have any? Can you
Yay.
explain that to us?
You thought you were going to get an easy night, huh?
No, anybody comes in after hours for a vehicle release, it has to be approved by a watch commander on duty. So the watch commander, who's a sergeant, will look at the paperwork and make sure it's all legitimate and it's good to go before the fees are collected.
Okay.
That clears it up.
It sure does. Thank you.
Is there an additional fee for after-hours release?
Not for us, for the tow yards, usually there is.
Okay.
They charge their gate fee, whatever it is, but for us, there's no additional charge.
Is there a large percentage of the releases done after hours, or is it very
No,
small?
Very few.
Very few. That's what I would, yeah.
I'd say probably 2 or 3 a month, if that.
Yeah, it's not a tremendous,
It's not common.
That allows for consideration of what the risk is.
Right. So
That volume.
this probably is not material in the audit.
No, it is
But
not.
it was flagged, okay.
It got flagged, that
Yes.
is correct. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have no other questions. I'll entertain a motion and a second to accept this and file it.
I will make a motion to accept after hours cash receipts.
Have a second?
I'll second that.
Any objections? Okay, we'll move on to our next item, which are the November, December 2018 financial reports.
Indeed. November is just the monthly reports, so it's just the standard 5 reports that I present to you each month. I didn't really see anything that stood out too much with November. The good thing that I continue to point out with every monthly report on the cash balances is that our general funds continue to have a positive balance at the end of the month. So we have a positive general fund moving forward still. So there hasn't even been interim borrowing between funds. It's remaining positive all the way through. So it all looks good for that. Reconciliations of the bank accounts. Let's see. We have reconciled through January 31st the the gas tax account, construction account, seizure account, and life. The payroll account we're working on doing January, but needs information from me. I haven't done it yet. The workers' compensation, working on that one. And then the checking account, I want to say we're at January the 23rd, I think is the date we are reconciling. We do reconcile that one weekly. So that one, everything's staying caught up as far as the reconciliations go. So we're not even far behind on those. Then the trustee accounts were reconciled for January this morning. So those are now up to date as well, even though they're not in this report. In looking at the general fund, current to actual, budget to actual, I didn't really see a lot that stood out. Our taxes don't follow on a month-to-month, so that percentage is always going to look a little odd till we get to the collection periods. And the fines and forfeitures were a little short on what we thought we'd be getting, but that has to do with the implementation of a software in our public safety and code enforcement departments where they're using now an electronic ticketing system. So now that that's up and running fully, we expect to see that catch up. So right now it's a little behind where we thought it would be, but it's not a concern. In looking at the current month, this year to the current month, the prior year, things actually don't look too far off. There's a few things that we thought would come in a little bit differently, but then there's other things that I can't quite explain. One being permits. Permits are up astronomically. We had a huge number of permits in the current year that we did not have in the prior year. The reason it's so much more is because we really were planning on residential. We don't really think too much about the commercial because it comes in spurts. You can't really necessarily dictate when that's going to happen or at what level it's going to happen. So in fiscal 18 or fiscal 18-19, we've already had several that have come in for businesses, and they're significant, which is throwing the numbers way up, way further than we originally anticipated. So those numbers are higher than we anticipated, and in fact, I have a budget adjustment for City Council tomorrow night that will increase our budget for that item because our collections are so much higher right now that the budget should be bumped up a little. The personnel costs, we are spending more now than we did this time the year before, and that's because we've hired more staff. We've also had several long-term staff that are no longer with the city, so we have to pay out their time banks, and those are always a significant hit. And I think we've had 4, maybe 5. So there's been several, and that really does a number on that. The other cost that has really risen that I think we've just recently gotten back under control is our workers' compensation. We've had several long-term cases that are finally getting settled. So those numbers were a little higher than we originally planned, but we're hoping they're less on the last half of the year that could help offset that. In the wastewater treatment plant, operations are going along. We're working on the expansion project, the construction project, and the brine line installations. So the numbers, of course, look a little bit funny to watch because they don't have a month-to-month on revenues. We bill every other month. And we're working on issues of timing of when it gets recognized in the books. And then we also have the construction, which is coming down in the capital improvements numbers where we budgeted 87 million. Of course, we haven't spent all of that yet, and probably won't spend all of it by June, because it's going to take a little longer than that still. So we budgeted all of it at that time, but it really is going to be rolling into next year as well. This year, November to last year, November, for the wastewater treatment plant, really our big thing is the charges for service. Those are the impact fees that we collect. And again, that relates right back to the new construction of the giant facilities that we have coming in, and they're becoming online in the next several months. So those impact fees just were higher than we also had anticipated. Didn't really see too much else with November, so if anyone has any questions on that. Okay, we can move on to December, our 6-month point. I didn't address this in November because it's really the same at December, but on the cash balances, how we have all the changes in cash, and we still have positive general fund cash balance. But you'll see we have 2 net adjustments to equity that are affecting the cash numbers. The first one, the $357,000, has to do with the recognition of Measure A. Originally, we had budgeted and we're going to recognize Measure A in the general fund, thinking that it was for the roads and all. Through the audits that we are almost done with, both of the auditors have suggested that that be moved to a special revenue fund as restricted, because it does have a special reporting element with it. So we've moved it. So in doing that, it changed the equity and built an equity into special funds starting this year. So that's what makes that look a little bit unusual. And then for capital funds, those have to do with recognition of 2 of the park fees that we collect from developers that they had been deferred. And so I was thinking I would put them through when they actually do come through, but then in talking to the auditors and how the prepayments work with those, we had to move them back into 18. So that's why that 919,000 is there as well. So it's a change just in the recognition and the timing. But the cash all reconciled, it all looked good. In the budget to actual activity for December, again, everything looked pretty good. Our fees are they're just higher than we had anticipated for permits, charges for service. And then we have the taxes, of course, which are lagging because we don't get all of those yet. The county has changed the county assessor's office has changed their software. They changed to a new software. It's gone online. They're having a lot of difficulties with it. We expected to get our income tax wire like the 15th, 20th of January, and we didn't. And then we didn't. We finally got the wire on January the 31st, so we're just now going through that wire to determine what the different pieces of that were in order to then match it back and make sure that we're getting the property taxes we expected, which includes the CFD assessments. We simply hadn't gotten them yet, so we're just now starting to work through that. Everything else looks pretty good. We're about 50% on our expenses, which is where we want to be. Remembering that our financials are really on a cash basis, and by the time we get to the end of the fiscal year, it all switches over to accrual. So we have a little bit of wiggle room. We don't want it right at 50%. So that's all in good standing right now as far as the expenses go. This year to the same time last year, you can see that one of the big problems we have is in charges for service. It has to do with the recognition of the trash billing. It didn't get booked in December, it got booked in January. Remember I said we bill every other month? So instead of it being in December, it's actually in January. So we're gonna move it back to fix that and make sure that it's equal, but it looks funny here, and that's why. It's just the timing of it. So we'll get that worked out. But otherwise, everything else looks not too different than what we expected. We knew that the payroll was going up. We know why it's up. And that'll be coming back under control as we stop having to pay out all of the time banks from long-term employees that have left. Then same with the wastewater budget to actual. The big difference is in the charges for service, which is the impact fees. And the rest of it is holding pretty well. Our personnel services costs, it looks like we haven't spent it all, but we also have just started hiring some of that staff to bring that service back in-house. So that's going to start picking up, and we should be able to fill that out by the end of the fiscal year. And this year to last year, again, the cycling on the revenues is really the only thing that we have to get nailed down. But the impact fees really are having a significant impact because of the businesses and commercial development that's coming in this year. So that is that. So that's the overview, the high level. But then you get all the detail. So I didn't go too deep into the detail, that there's a lot of it. But I'm going to skip all the way to the vendor history report. The vendor history report, I have it organized for largest dollar amount spent to the vendors down to the lower amount. So I've included all of the people who have been paid cumulatively for the 6 months more than $10,000. That accounts for almost 97% of all of our vendors, which is not too surprising, but that tells you that you've got the bulk of our vendors listed here. This is a report of checks and ACH transactions that have been performed. The one thing that I have discovered is it doesn't include wire transfers if we didn't do it through the right module. So there's some wire transfers that don't get picked up, and we're looking to change the way we do that so that doesn't happen anymore. But you can still see that our Potrero construction, that's really our biggest cost right now. And then we have the solid waste contract, that's another large one. CAL FIRE right now looks like it's not too high, but that's only 1 quarter. We don't have the second quarter invoice from CAL FIRE yet. They usually are 60 days behind before we get it. So that will bump them right on up, probably to the number 2 spot when we have that. And it just kind of goes all the way down. I've given you kind of the generalized purpose of each one of our vendors so you can take a look and see if you have any questions on any of them. And then the last report is our projects. And as I did last quarter, if you look at the last page of that, you get just a top view summary of each one of the projects and where they stand on a net basis. And I think that's probably easier to read than all the summarized totals for each project. We're working to clean up the project summary. We're going to be doing some of the work in the next couple of months of cleaning up the ones that need to be closed, and then taking some of the ones that we need to offset and put in another bucket. We'll get those transfers done as well. So the project summary report should clean up and be a little shorter in the next quarter report when it comes up. And that's what I have for the financial reports. So if there are any questions on any of this, I will answer your questions.
I have one question.
Sure.
And this may just be for clarification for me since I'm a newbie.
Sure.
Just noticing on the income statement through December, expenses about 5 million more than revenue and a transfer. Where do the transfers originate?
Transfers come from other restricted funds, and I had not done the December quarter end evaluation of costs to make sure those transfers should be booked. So it'll come from, say, the restricted funds for gas tax. Some of that will be transferred over to cover our streets and roads department, and then I also have to do an evaluation of our CFD administration costs, and then we'll transfer some of that over, as well as the CFD for maintenance of the different parks and areas. Then once I've done that, then we'll move that over. So the transfers will come back up. I just hadn't had the opportunity to do all of that analysis yet. And yeah, it's money that's coming from some of the other restricted pots that then can be used to offset some of our costs that we've incurred.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This vendor list is something that we were very concerned about in the beginning because of some of the histories. There are a couple things on here that I'm just kind of curious about.
Sure.
And wondering if maybe there should be a portion of it redacted. We have an individual named here, and it's a 6-figure income that says a seizure evidence return.
Correct.
Kick this out to anybody. Is this something that the name probably should have been redacted?
Possibly. I'm not sure that we have, it may be actually available online on the transparency portal. So
And
I'd need to look and see, but you're
And that
right.
may be, I'm just wondering if for your reports you're generating for us, that perhaps anything that identifies a one-shot, one-time individual maybe should be redacted for this purpose, but it would be available to anybody who wanted to go to transparency portal, or somebody who wanted to make a grandma request.
Right. We could do that. We could do that.
I had a question, if I could, on the largest single vendor, of course, is Ortiz on the project transaction.
Yes.
Showing on it, and then I'm looking down at the project activity report, and just trying to understand it, looking at the phase capital improvements, it's open. I'm seeing the transactions amount here. I'm trying to reconcile that initial 4 million plus on that vendor list. That was actual disbursements or payments on applications for construction made to Ortiz?
Those are actual payments to Ortiz, yes. And the expenses for the project is on page 2 of 11 of the projects. And the total payments are $15,205,000 for the project itself. So of the 15 million, 4.5, almost 4.6 of that is to Ortiz.
So this is showing the total projected cost, and then the payments are the 4 million figure reflected on that total 15 projected for total project costs?
It is part of the 15 is actually incurred.
Incurred debt
Yes.
based upon completion of the project?
Right, that's what we've incurred to date for the project.
And do we show how we are getting reimbursed for the federal grants on that also?
Yes, when we move to the accrual at the end of the year is when we pick up how much is owed to us by Caltrans and RCTC on that. And we do have billings that are going to them about every 6 weeks. So we're keeping tabs on how much of they owe us. We also then have the matching funds that we have from the prepayment of impact fees that we receive from local area developers there. And so we have to do a calculation, and then we'll move those funds over at the same time.
Is there an average time when the payment, the request for reimbursement goes to federal grant? What's the time period before we?
The delay?
Yeah.
The delay?
The lag, whatever. We want to call it.
Delay? The delay has been about 90 days.
Okay.
And Potrero specifically is our single audit item, so that one gets looked at over and over and over and over.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Any other questions?
I have a question for Milana. We have some new members that might find this interesting. How many of these reports were in place when you started in this job?
0.
So I think that that's good for the new members to know how much progress has been made on the quality of these reports. And when our new treasurer is sworn in, the treasurer report was specifically worked out with Milana on what the former treasurer wanted to see in the treasurer report. So if there's anything that you want to see or tweak or ask for, you go right ahead and you just ask for, and that holds true for the rest of the committee also, on any of these financial reports. If there's anything that you feel that you want to see more of, all you have to do is ask, because all of these reports, basically from 0 to 60 here, have come because of requests to drill down on information and to produce the best quality that we can. So everybody just have at it.
Right. And there's a bazillion more reports I could generate.
And just for information to the new members and those of us who are here, the reports that we're currently seeing are the ones that the existing committee at that time thought were reports that would have the most value to us. But we requested those with the understanding that that may very well change as we started seeing the reports. And so as you see these reports, if they appear to be information missing or something you'd like to see, please come back and we'll discuss it at our meetings. And our goal is to have the reports that make the most sense to us, that have the most use. And this is all relatively new, and we've thanked, the committee has thanked Milana several times. What we had when I first started wasn't hardly anything, and before that there was literally nothing, and what was there, we had no idea where it came from.
It was very hard to ask questions when you didn't have anything to look at.
That's exactly right. And so the progress that's
Sure
been
was.
made is phenomenal.
Yes, yes.
And we give a lot of credit to that, to the finance department.
Thank you.
We have a great group, and I don't know what I'd do without them. It's
I know.
just too many different things that we got to accomplish in a day, and so it takes quite a few of us.
I'll add another benchmark to that for those who are new to this committee. How far behind were we in our bank reconciliations at our worst?
When I first showed up, over a year.
So this is substantial progress.
Okay, if there are other questions, we'll entertain a committee to accept these and forward them on for presentation to the city council.
I make a motion to accept.
I'll second that motion.
Any objections? Okay, then we'll go forward with that. The next item is future agenda items. The only thing I'm aware of is that in the February meeting, I will be presenting a report, and it won't be long, on what this committee is actually charged by code with the doing, and what steps we've been doing, and the biggest item that's out there is whatever things or whatever activities the city council would like us to work on, and we are inviting the city council to look into that, and we're welcoming anything that we can do to help, and with the rest of the members, be considering that over the next month. If there's something that you're aware of that you think may make some value to the city council, be prepared to speak on that. Again, we just are reminding you that our purpose is to advise the city council, and to put that in real simple terms, we do the grunt work, and make it so the city council can accomplish what the city needs and not have to work 900 hours a week. So anybody else know of anything that needs to be, or they would like to be considered for a future agenda?
I'm hoping to have all of my internal controls done, and I'm hoping to bring the next audit, the 17-18 fiscal audit and internal control letter in March.
In March. Mm-hmm. All right. And then, of course, 1st of April, we'd expect the update on the list of the projects that have been done.
Yes.
Okay. Finance Director's comments, next item.
That's really what I have. I want my audit. But I am working with them to get things finalized. So I do expect that we'll have it, and we'll be able to go through it and talk about it and see what recommendations they have. And then we can go from there, and we'll be on point to have our financial reports on a monthly basis consistently. So the next one will have the January 2019 financial reports, and we'll be able to stay on track for that, and then we can see if there's anything else the committee is directed to do by council, or if the committee thinks of something else that we need to take on, then we can do that as well.
Okay.
I have a suggestion potentially for a future item. We have some new members, so it might be worthwhile for Milana to give us an overview summary of how she accounts for CFD money and how the accounts are defined, and how she manages the money that comes in from the CFDs, and what are the checks and balances for that. If anybody else feels it would be important. It just seems like with new members,
would.
that would be a good
We
summary.
haven't really gotten into some of the deep parts of that whole process, so that would be good.
Okay. You give us Milena, give us a reasonable date. Could you do that in February or in March?
Not February, because that would be now.
Oh, March or April?
If I have the audit, I won't do it at the same time. So that
So-
would be April. And
So the
we'll-
month after the audit, we'll just put it that way.
We'll start at the beginning, and I'll show you how I've structured all the different components of the CFD process, and then we can talk about what I get when and how we account for it and deal with it at different points in time.
And when you do that, if you would just include some notation of what we had for CFD reporting from our partner, where we used to use Union Bank, and now we use,
Wilmington?
yes. So if you would explain about the reporting that they do for you, so that we know that there's also someone behind you that's providing you with the information that you need.
Definitely.
Okay, and in the past, I know that your department and you in particular have invited any member of this committee that would like a little better understanding of what happens and where it works. You've invited them to make contact with you and set up a time if they'd like to come in. Does that offer still stand?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And our new treasurer will get to come in and visit with us weekly. So we look forward to that. It'll be awesome.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, the next item on our agenda is the meeting review and the treasurer's monthly finance and audit report. And since we haven't had an auditor or a treasurer and typically don't, I assume we're just not doing that this month again. That could be correct. Is the council okay with not having that report done?
Yeah, we had talked, at least I've talked with the city manager and Milana on how we're doing that checks and balances. So we have that third person that's doing that checkup. So it'll end soon, thank goodness. Welcome aboard.
Yes, indeed.
But there'd been some comments about some of the public being a little unsure of how we were doing that, but
Okay. Okay, the next regular meeting of the Finance and Audit Committee is scheduled for Monday, March 4th at 6 p.m. And we will adjourn today's meeting at 7:13 p.m. Thank everybody for your time.